America, hello. Am I right that you're all a tingle today? Because some audiences get all the fun. Tonight, we're talking about abortion. It doesn't get any more fun than that. This is a topic that nobody on television ever wants to address. This is something that is going to be remembered one way or another as the slavery or slave debate of our time. Some point in the future, 100 years ago, people are either going to say, how did they not finance all abortions for everybody all the time? Or, how did they miss that they were killing children? One of the two. And one side or the other is going to be blamed by future generations. You know, the problem with the founders was we look at them with today's eyes on slavery. Slavery just was when our founders were growing up. It was a new idea to stop slavery. Abortion, however, is a relatively new idea. And it is, not surprisingly, a progressive idea. Tonight, you're going to learn stuff about the progressive history that will shock you. But I want to start here. I want to reframe this a little bit. If I told you that there were people in Afghanistan, under the noses of our troops, that were assisting mullahs, that were keeping underage girls in a slave trade, and our troops were not reporting it, and they were watching it go on. They were, in fact, assisting or advising the pimps. Would you say those troops need to come home and be court-martialed? Those troops should not be serving us? I think the answer would be yes. If I told you that our dollars in Egypt were being used to keep young girls in, even if they were living in luxury, but they were being kept so men could come and rape them, and our money was going to give them medical support, to make sure that they're healthy, make sure that they didn't have children, they got abortions from the rapes every night. If I told you that we had video of people, our own people, assisting them, would you say that would be a front-page story? It's not a front-page story because it's happening here in America. And it's happening at Planned Parenthood. And nobody wants to think about it. That's why I think in time abortion will be recognized as the horror that it is, because we haven't changed. Technology has changed. If you could see, I've always thought ever since I was a little kid, if you could have a room, a womb with a window in it, a window womb, you would never abort a baby, because you would recognize that it was a baby, and you'd be amazed at the features and everything that was there. Well, there's no window there, but there now is technology that can show you the child. We can now keep a child alive outside the womb earlier. Well, what has changed? Only technology and us. The fact of the child hasn't changed. But people don't want to look at the facts or the pictures, and they don't want to think about it. And that's why there's not one video or two videos or 5 videos or 10 videos. There are dozens of videos showing horrible things happening at Planned Parenthood, where a pimp will come in and will say, hey, I've got all these underage girls and I got to get them abortions. Can you help? And they say yes. Videos of underage girls or people posing as 13-year-old girls going into Planned Parenthood and saying, I got a 31-year-old boyfriend, 31, I'm 13, he's 31, and I'm pregnant. Can you help me out? Yeah, of course we can. Shh, just keep it between us. These videos have been out now for 4 years, and it hasn't gotten much attention. Tonight, I will introduce you to these videos, and I think to some of the bravest people I've ever met. I'm a dad of 3 daughters. If you're a mom or dad of a daughter, if your daughter ran away from home, I don't care what the deal is, ran away from home at 14, she runs away, not realizing how bad the world really is, and before she knows it, she's on the streets here in New York or Los Angeles or even your own hometown. And to survive, she has to have sex with men. She has a pimp to protect her. If she doesn't, she could get killed. Pimp's not going to. Pimp wants his money. Pimp's going to make sure she's there, telling her she's not worth anymore, or sometimes getting her hooked on drugs, so she has to stay. Well, I don't know about you, but I hope to God that somebody in a medical or a clinic sees her and she's pregnant. I hope to God they don't just abort the child and fix her up so she can go out and have more sex and help the pimp. I hope to God that somebody saves her life and says, "What has happened to you?" I have to tell you, I was walking down the street in New York one day, and this is about 2 years ago, and I saw this girl. She must have been 13, 14, 15 years old. I don't know. And she was walking down the street, and she just looked dead inside. It was just outside of Times Square. Now, I'm not going to walk up to her and go, "Hey, are you a hooker?" I don't think that would work out well for me. But I would bet my life that she was. And I saw my daughters and thought, how bad does her life have to be to even put her in that position? And what is it like now? We have cloaked Planned Parenthood in happiness, in compassion. That's going to change tonight, because I believe one thing is true. A bad tree cannot bear good fruit, period. You need to know the roots of this tree. You need to know the roots of Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger. Watch.
Thanks to all of you at Planned Parenthood for all the work that you are doing. I was proud to get Planned Parenthood's endorsement yesterday.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision.
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
Planned Parenthood received over $363 million in taxpayer dollars. I believe the time has come for that to end. And in 2008 alone, they performed 324,008 abortions.
What he's got against the Planned Parenthood people I've yet to discover. They've done I thought, a pretty good job.
You're going to see us fight to end taxpayer funding of abortion once and for all.
What they want to do is essentially make abortion unavailable.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. I am really in awe of her.
I honestly don't know how you can be in awe of this woman, especially if you have read anything about her or know what she really truly believed in or how Planned Parenthood came about. You have to remember that this is during the Progressive era. And on the other side of the ocean were the Fabian Socialists. They are from the same tree, and they bear the same kind of fruit. The Fabian Socialists were George Bernard Shaw and H.G. Wells, and they're still going on. Remember, this is the stained glass window that shows them heating the world up, setting it on fire, and then pounding it on the anvil, shaping the world closer to their heart's desire. These people did not, but they believed that there was a superior race. These are the ultimate ranchers. It is from the Fabian Socialists and the Progressives that we get the death camps in Germany in the 1930s. Margaret Sanger was an amazing progressive, but she wasn't the only one that thought this way. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said in 1927, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for a crime or let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough." This is 1924. This is, let's sterilize people. We'll decide who is an imbecile and who is not. Let's kill them. Compassionately, let's kill them. I'm going to show you a diagram. This is again from the Progressive era. This is a diagram of workers. You see, you have the idiot. They're mentally 3 years old. Self-preservation is as high as they can go. Simple menial work, low-grade imbecile, 4 to 5 years old. Median imbecile is somebody who only has a mental age of 6 to 8 years old. They can do simple manual work. Complex manual work can be done by a high-grade imbecile, 8 to 10 years old, and a moron is mostly 10 to 12 years old, and they can do work requiring no reason or judgment. Those people should be exterminated. I want to show you, this is that page, and let me just give you a little bit of it. They talk about how we should examine people, and if there are any of these, we should fingerprint them and maybe send them off to an island. But they go on to say, strange to say, strong opposition to institutional treatment of the imbeciles often comes from parents, even when such care of the sick or defective child would be a great relief to the family. This is another proof of the need of a campaign to educate parents. What they're saying here is they need to educate parents that your kids are morons. Let us take them. Let us take them. For compassion, it'll be easier for the family. Well, the Fabian Socialists were actually ahead of the American progressives on this one. They had thought about it for a long time. And of course, beloved playwright George Bernard Shaw, he talked about people who are just too stupid to be kept alive. Here he is, George Bernard Shaw, on imbeciles.
If you're not pulling your weight in the social rope, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be of very much use to yourself.
Explain yourself. Go to in front of a panel and explain yourself. Justify your life. And if you can't, well, I mean, you're of no use to us, and your life is no use to you, so we'll have to kill you. He was the first one to come up with death chambers that later the Germans used. See, the reason why this always goes bad is because there's always somebody who somebody else thinks, if we just get rid of these people. This is why you can't judge whose life is worth living and whose life is not worth living. You have to be very clear. All life is worth living. Otherwise, somebody as famous as Alexander Graham Bell is going to judge. He thought, let's kill him. Or Teddy Roosevelt. I know people just love Teddy Roosevelt. Let me show you this. This is a letter from Teddy Roosevelt from the Outlook. Can you bring it up here? He was at the Outlook in New York when he wrote this. And one of the doctors who was putting one of these camps together, Charles Davenport, he was a eugenist. He was somebody who says, hey, eugenics is a better way to living. And he writes in this, Teddy Roosevelt writes back, he says, any group of farmers who permitted their best stock not to breed and let all the increase come from the worst stock would be treated as fit inmates for an asylum. Yet we fail to understand that such conduct is rational compared to the conduct of the motion which permits unlimited breeding from the worst stocks. He's talking about people. He goes on to say, it encourages or connives at the cold selfishness or the twisted sentimentality, as a result of which men and women ought to marry and have large families, remain celibate, or have no children, or only one or two. Someday we will realize the prime duty and inescapable duty of the good citizen of the right type is to leave his or her blood behind him in the world. And we have no business to perpetuate the citizens of the wrong type. Theodore Roosevelt. It was very popular with progressives. Joseph P. Kennedy and Rose Kennedy had a child of special needs. Her name was Rosemary. I don't know if you know, she was the reason Kennedy started the Special Olympics. Eunice Kennedy was the sister. Dad believed in eugenics. Dad was embarrassed by the imbecile. So Dad sent the family away and didn't tell anybody in the family, including Rose, that he was going to take the imbecile of the family, the embarrassment of the family, and give her a lobotomy. Because she was an embarrassment, and it would be easier on the family. Eunice Shriver, I think, was horrified by that. I'm guessing. But that's why she started Special Olympics. I think in the end that we are going to be the ones thought of as special needs, not the Olympians. This philosophy is no different. It's happening still in America. Overseas, we showed you this about a year ago. This is a woman on the BBC saying it's the compassionate thing as a mother to kill your child. Watch.
If I were a mother of a suffering child, I would be the first to want, a deeply suffering child, I would be the first to want to put a pillow over its face.
Doctor, that's a pretty horrifying thing to say, that you would put a pillow over...
Of course I would, if it was a child I really loved who is in agony. I think any good mother would.
Okay. The one thing that you will argue, or people will argue, is, well, you going to take care of them? Yes. Yes. The system is overloaded with parents who want nothing more than to care for an unwanted child. 2 million parents are currently waiting to adopt. I know what it feels like because my wife and I waited for our child for a long time. My child, Rafe, is the product of a teenager in trouble. She did the bravest thing any young girl could do. She gave birth and then gave our son to us. So the answer is yes, we will take care of the children. Back in a minute. I want to introduce you to somebody that I met a year ago, I think, about a year ago. I was giving a speech in New Jersey, and before I got up to speak, this young woman stood up And I have to tell you, I don't think I mean, besides some of the Navy SEAL friends that I have and Special Forces friends that I have who are, I mean, they do stuff that I think, that's insane. I can't think of a private citizen that I think is more brave. Lila Rose is the president of Live Action. It is a pro-life organization that documents Planned Parenthood violations. But she started out in California. You were in California. You went to, I want to say, it wasn't UC Berkeley, was it?
UCLA.
UCLA. Okay. Still California. And you start on campus saying, hey, I want to talk to you about pro-life issues. That had to be very popular.
Well, surprisingly, Glenn, definitely there was some pushback, but the pushback at UCLA was more from faculty and yes, and from administrators and the students. You know, there was a vocal minority of students who were very for abortion, but most of the students wanted to hear the truth. And a lot of students were so pro-life and were so excited to hear that they could stand up for the lives of unborn children.
And you have no problem with somebody having a fair debate on both sides. I mean, for instance, before we get into the violations, and these will blow your mind, there's one place that I can't go as a dad, and it's just because I can't disconnect my heart from my head. You know, it's Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter. I don't know if anybody's ever read it, but you should look it up. It's great. It was a love letter, and it was an argument between my heart and my head. And, for instance, abuse from, you know, if you're raped or incest, I know it's a child, but it's also another child on the other end. And so I had this really hard time. You don't have a problem with having that debate with people, right?
We need to have that debate.
Right. And so there's no problem with having a debate. But the problem comes where nobody is talking about the actual abuses that are going on because of Planned Parenthood. Explain.
Well, first of all, let me say Planned Parenthood, the ultimate abuse of that organization, the biggest abortion chain in our country, is the victim of the unborn child, because they kill more unborn children, which are our most defenseless Americans in our country, over 300,000 of them a year. So that's the ultimate victim. But beyond that, you mentioned incest victims, and you mentioned rape victims, Glenn. And beyond that, a lot of those victims find their ways into Planned Parenthood's clinics. They're taken there often by their abusers. And then traffic victims. We have over 300,000 traffic victims in our country, children that are trafficked, sold for sex. And they find their way into these clinics, and they become victims too.
These are the same kind of people that we saw with Acorn, where you have a pimp go in and say, hey, I've got these underage kids, and they're coming in, and they did nothing. Here is, well, let me show you the map where there are violations from Planned Parenthood, things that people should go to jail. Here are the violations. There are 31 different locations. Let's pull up the different ones. Let's go to New Jersey first. Tell me a little bit about this video before we play it.
Sure. The video that we're about to see shows a Planned Parenthood manager in the second biggest chain of clinics in New Jersey advising our actors who are posing as human traffickers of 14 and 15-year-old girls and telling them how they can use the system, get cheaper abortions and birth control for the little girls to keep them on the street. This is part of our trafficking investigation, where we've released 7 different clinics showing Planned Parenthood willing to aid and abet the trafficking of little girls.
Here it is.
We're involved in sex work, all right? And there's some girls that we manage that we're not quite sure if I got it from one of them.
Okay.
All right, so they might need to come in here and get tested as well. Do you guys provide services for that? Some of them are young. They're kind of like, some are like 15, 14.
You know, me and my other counselor, like, for the most part, we want as little information as possible. Even if they lie, just say, oh, he's the same age as me, 15.
What if they need an abortion, though?
You never got this from me, just to make all of our lives easier.
Okay.
If they're 14 and under, just send them right there if they need an abortion. Okay.
Wow. What happened?
what happened. What you saw and what we saw again and again during our investigation is Planned Parenthood workers, from the manager to the practitioner to the staffer, they don't care about these young girls. They don't really care about these young women. They care about aiding and abetting these abusers and getting them secret abortions, secret birth control, and then sending these little girls back out the door.
And that person was fired, though, in New Jersey?
After Planned Parenthood called it a hoax and pretended it wasn't real, the pressure built, then they fired the first one.
Okay, let me play one more. This is Bloomington, Indiana. This is you, isn't it?
This is me posing undercover.
You. While she could still get away with it, and I'll tell you that story in a minute. Watch.
How old are you?
I'm 13. And I act a lot older than I am, so it works out because he might be 31.
Okay. I didn't hear the age. I don't want to know the age.
So if I just say, I don't know who the father was, but he's one of the guys at school or something.
Right. Just, you know, you've seen him around, you know he's 14, he's in your grade and whatever.
What did you think when you saw somebody saying to a 13-year-old, hey, I don't want to know the 31 age?
Well, I remember being in that clinic acting as a 13-year-old, and when she said that, and I saw that again and again. I mean, we went to 10 different clinics for that project. We saw the same response, ultimately the cover-up of abuse. And my heart was broken because I heard an adult woman who was in a healthcare professional setting telling a little girl who's basically saying, I've been raped, you know, I'm a statutory rape victim, I'm a sexual abuse victim, telling her, I don't care, don't tell me anything. Oh, and then later on in the conversation, she talks about, is he going to pay for it? You know, this is how much it costs, and basically figuring it out so the little girl can get the pregnancy taken care of, send her right out the door.
Did they fire her?
They fired this one.
What about the other ones that you did?
All of the other ones remained. One of them resigned. The other 8 maybe still working there.
And because of this, they put your picture up like a wanted poster at Planned Parenthood, right?
Yes, that's right.
And what is that? Explain that story.
So they have my photo up in many of the clinics because of these investigations. As a brunette, they've had my photo up saying Lila Rose is doing these investigations. Since I was 18, they've had that photo up. I'm 22 now. So for that project that you just saw in that Indiana video, I bleached my hair to keep going undercover. They put up a blonde photo up next to the brunette, so now they're catching on to us, right? But the reality is I work with a team of talented young people from across the country, so we're still doing these investigative projects, and regardless of the fact that we've revealed this so many times over the years, they're still covering up abuse. They're not only covering it up,
that's because nobody in the media is really, I mean, this one has gotten more coverage than any of them that I have seen. Let me just ask you a question before we break, and that is this. If that was your 13-year-old daughter, is that how you would want another fellow citizen to respond? Back in a minute. We're back with Lila Rose. She is the president of Live Action, a pro-life organization that documents Planned Parenthood violations. She is on wanted posters in, have you ever walked in and they've caught you at Planned Parenthood?
No, but I have walked in and seen my photo on the wall while I was undercover, and thankfully they did not recognize me. So that was pretty startling to see my face on their wall and posing as an underage girl, but they just went right ahead and covered up the sex abuse and definitely didn't notice that it was me.
How many people have gone to like a tea party or something in the last 2 years, or done something that's out of their comfort zone that you, because I've done a lot of stuff out of my comfort, stuff that I never saw myself doing, you know, just a few years ago, right? Okay. Most likely it wasn't putting a hidden camera in your bag and dressing up as a 13-year-old girl, and you, sir, would look good as a 13-year-old girl. Dressing up as a 13-year-old girl and going in, how did you do that? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, first of all, Glenn, we're talking about research that's been done for years in the pro-life movement and real cases, court cases, cases that have come up in the news of girls who've been sexually abused, taken to abortion Planned Parenthood clinics, and it's covered up. So when I started finding out about this when I was 18 and learning about it, being very active in pro-life work, working with a pro-life group, a pro-life club at UCLA, I thought we need visual evidence of this. So that's been a progression of trying to get that visual evidence. And at the end of the day, any risk or any fear or any getting out of your comfort zone to do this investigative work is worth it, because we're exposing what's happening in these clinics every day, and people need to know about it.
Did you walk out at the beginning and go, oh my gosh, I have it on tape and the world won't believe this?
Definitely, when I walked out of the first clinic after getting it on tape, I remember thinking, I can't believe she said that.
Right.
And then thinking, people need to see this.
Okay, but have you been shocked at the silence and the unwillingness of the press to really know?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think there were some times where I was surprised that so few people seemed to care, but that was traditional media. And as a young person and our organization uses social media, it uses new media, independent media, that's where it's at these days, because a lot of those gatekeepers, the traditional media, they just won't talk about things that matter sometimes. And our generation is fed up with it, and so we're taking it to the internet, to Facebook, we're taking it to blogs, YouTube, and we're telling the stories that need to be told. So that's what our organization does.
I have to tell you, I'm as a member of the mainstream media, and
no offense to you.
No, we suck. Even on this network, which is the only network that would do an hour on this, I wonder what the ratings will be like. I wonder what the pushback will be like, not in the building, but outside of the building, because nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to know.
They want to look away.
Yeah, I said to somebody who actually was the designer of the rendition project, and I disagree with rendition. If you're going to torture somebody, have the cojones to torture them yourself in your name. And if people who say, I just don't want to know about it, they're doing it in your name. If you can walk in and stand by somebody who they're performing torture or abortion, and you can stand in the room, you might walk out and say, that was the worst experience of my life, but thank you for doing that. Well, then you've thought of it, and that's up to you. That's your choice. But to say, I don't even want to think about it, I don't care what they do, that's what leads to mass murder, because people don't pay attention. Back in just a second. We're back with Lila Rose. She is the president of Live Action, and Congress right now is talking about, should we fund abortions and should we fund Planned Parenthood, which that's the same thing. Let me go to Brent, and I'm sorry, Brent, what's your wife's name?
Ambia.
Ambia. You had a question.
Yes, Nancy Skinner had said in an interview that we had seen online that Planned Parenthood does not accept federal funding for abortions, but only for reproductive health. Is there any proof? How do they prove that? How do they differentiate
Well,
that?
let me ask you this. Let's say you're against torture. Say you're staunchly against all torture. And somebody says, well, we're not going to pay you. I'm not going to take your money and pay for torture. I'm just going to pay for the room, the water, the lighting, and the heat or refrigeration, whichever we prefer. Are you paying for torture or not?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, is there a difference?
And every dollar that is given to this organization is funding the behavior of the employees that you see on tape. Every dollar.
How many of these videos did you have to make? Like that first video that you made, how many clinics did you have to go in before you got somebody to do that?
First one I ever walked into, Glenn, when I was 18, I walked in and I said, he's 24 or 23, I'm 15, what do I do? It was statutory rape. And they said, just figure out a birth date that works, lie on the paperwork. First clinic. Second clinic, similar things. Third clinic, similar, and beyond. It's almost every single time.
Connie.
Yes, hi, Glenn.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Well, I had asked why, if it were just rogue employees of Planned Parenthood that did this, or the higher-ups. You had mentioned managers, and now I'm thinking the higher-up would be the government, but it doesn't surprise me what they do with our tax dollars, so
no.
Question answered.
I mean, how could it be? I mean, that's what they always try to do. That's why, quite honestly, that was the excuse of Acorn, and that's why many times they threw those employees of Acorn right under the bus. But I mean, that started with the Rathke boys. I mean, that was all the way from the top. Have you ever caught a a head person?
Well, managers, practitioners, you know, the top nurse. But beyond that, we've seen top-level executives like the Vice President Executive Stuart Shearer saying that the behavior on the tape is professional, saying that this is professional care, that they're providing all the options to the pimp about how he can sell the girls on the street, etc. That's
well,
how.
If you define professional as doing something for money, yes, it is professional. Back in just a second. Nels Robinson is from Montana. He says he is a conservative and a constitutionalist, but
I'm having I have a hard issue with the aspect of like a rape case or violence, something like that. As a conservative, what other conservatives feel about, you know, abortion in that case.
So you're kind of with me that you are so strong on this, except you get fuzzy when it, right?
Yes.
And most people are like that. How do you answer that?
So first of all, I want to talk about my friend Rebecca. And she's a pro-life speaker, and she was the victim, the product of a rape. But she's just as much a human being as you or I are. So that the first thing there is that the unborn children that are conceived by violence of the rape, that is not their fault. That's the fault of their father, who's a criminal who needs to be put behind bars, etc. But the other aspect here is the solution to the pain of a rape or incest victim an abortion? Is abortion something that they're going to, 10, 15, 20 years later, going to be happy that it happened to them? Is that going to take away the suffering of their rape? And I think you'll talk to rape victims and the ones that have bravely chosen to go through with the pregnancy and give that child a chance, and they're not going to say, oh, I wish I'd had an abortion. They're going to say, wow, that was a redemptive part of this suffering. That was something that helped to redeem it. But abortion adds more violence to that violent act of rape.
I will tell you another argument. Another argument for it would be, well, he's got the genes. You know, that child's got the genes of a rapist. And that goes back to eugenics. That goes back to the argument, well, you got to get rid of them because they're imbeciles or they're criminals, and they'll always be criminals. And as Oliver Wendell Holmes said, you know, isn't 3 generations of imbeciles enough? Does that help at all?
That helps.
Let me leave you with one more story, and we'll do that next. Now, I told you at the beginning of the program that it's a subject that we have to talk about, and we have to each ponder and really think hard. Here I am, a guy who says, I can't imagine my daughter being raped or involved with incest and having to choose and tell her, no, you've got to have the baby. I think of my daughter. But then I think of somebody else. This guy. My son, who was born from a 14-year-old girl, without getting into any of the details. She was a brave girl. My son was born of a superhero. He doesn't need anybody with a cape. He has the woman who gave birth and then did a brave thing, gave him to us. He is a joy. I told you the story also of Joseph P. Kennedy. His daughter, Rosemary, had a lobotomy because she was an imbecile. And people used to be ashamed, and people wants to shut people up. My oldest daughter was born with cerebral palsy. And had I not been wise, had they given me a choice, I probably, at my age at that time, would have said, oh, well, it won't be any quality of life. Well, the truth is, if I would have done that, my quality of life would have been much, much lower. I've learned more from her and from him than any professor I could have ever had. From New York, good night, America.